All right, this is something I've been looking to do for a long time, and I finally got around to it. So it's week 9, and what I want to do is actually go through and build a lineup together for this weekend. And this is going to be a cash game lineup. So it's a lineup that I'm going to use in both 50-50s and heads up matches. So I'm looking for guys with high floors. I'm not looking to take a lot of risk. I'm looking for some sure points to hopefully get me in that top 50% or be enough to beat my opponent. So that's what I'll be looking for as we go through here. A couple of things while I'm thinking about it is every single week I go through and I project different points or point scores for every single player. So if you hear me refer to how many points this player has projected, it's my own personal projections. I use a bunch of different matchups. I go pretty in depth on a bunch of different layers, position by position, and come up with a number. That number is then basically run through 10,000 times to reduce variance. So what you see, it tends to be a little more conservative. And then I'll run these lineups through something like a lineup optimizer, and I'll get my top lineups. So let's get started here. I want to in 50-50s, I really like to not pay up for a quarterback, but essentially get someone who I know is going to have a high floor. And guys like Andrew Luck, Peyton Manning, and Tom Brady will, but they're a little too expensive for me. Brady, who has had good weeks and has had bad weeks, I'd prefer to stay away from. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go with Philip Rivers, and I'm gonna plug him in as my quarterback. Rivers is actually my highest projected quarterback this week. I have him scoring 24 points, and again, just looking on the basis of a high floor. So he's thrown 2 or 3 touchdowns in every single game since week 1. And he's thrown 3 touchdowns in 4 of the last 5. So there's obviously a ton of other quarterbacks, but Rivers seems just as likely to score 3 touchdowns as the other guys do. And he comes at a cheaper price tag. So Philip Rivers, I think, provides a little bit of more flexibility instead of guys like Andrew Luck, but I'm able to not pay a huge price. So moving right along, let's get a running back on the board, and a lot of great options this week. Arian Foster is my highest projected running back, actually one of the highest totals of the season. I have him at 30 points, but 9,900 is just really tough to fit into a lot of different lineups. So gonna stay away from Arian Foster for this lineup, although I love him. Same goes for DeMarco Murray. I think he could have another big day. I'm gonna go a little bit further down the list and go with Marshawn Lynch. Marshawn Lynch is a guy who's had a couple of down weeks in a row, but I blame those subpar performances more on game flow than anything. Just didn't really need to pound it like the Seahawks usually do. They had to throw a little bit more, rely on Russell Wilson. So I just really think that getting back at home against a bad Oakland defense, who of the teams playing this week have allowed the most fantasy points to opposing running backs. So the Falcons give up more, but they're on bye this week. So this is just a really great matchup. Just feels like a game that they want to get back to being the Seattle Seahawks, pound the ball, not have to throw it all over the yard, and they should be able to do it against Oakland. So Marshawn Lynch seems like a pretty safe bet to get a bunch of touches and rack up the DraftKings points. All right, I want to go down to tight end because this is a really interesting position. And on a normal week now, there's 6 teams on bye this week, which makes things get ugly really quickly. The wide receiver position gets super ugly super quick. But the tight end position is really interesting. So there's usually a few values at tight end. And in different cash games or different GPPs, I might actually flex out a tight end as well, because there's some of these guys that are just seem like they're guaranteed to score touchdowns. The one I really prefer this week is Rob Gronkowski, but there's just too many. I mean, the $2,000 difference between him and Julius Thomas is not worth it. I don't think Gronk is $2,000 better than Julius is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug Julius Thomas in. I think he's a pretty safe bet. Julius projects in my projections at 15.73 points, so it's definitely respectable. Definitely would be a great number to put up. He's a guy with multi-touchdown upside, and the reason that you see that is he actually accounts for 26% of his team's red zone targets. So when they're not in the red zone, it's 16%, which is still respectable as a tight end. But when they get in close, Julius Thomas becomes a big-time red zone target for Peyton Manning, and he can just rack up a ton of touchdowns that way. So he's a great option this week. Also, if you buy into the theory that Peyton Manning likes to keep all his receivers happy, this would be the week for Julius Thomas. So Demaryius has had a couple big weeks. Emmanuel Sanders has had a huge week last Thursday with 3 touchdowns, and if you buy into that theory that Peyton wants to keep all his guys happy, I guess it's Julius Thomas's week. If you think it's Wes Welker, good luck. I just don't think he's involved in the offense that much. They don't run a lot of plays where he's the first option. So Julius Thomas to me is a great play, and definitely worth the 5,600. I would like Gronk, but not going to pay up for him. Okay, another thing that I like to do is get a defense off the board. It's almost a mental thing because you get to put the cheaper defense in and you see your average remaining salary come down. So it's almost just a little bit of tricking my brain, but I like to plug the defense in relatively early when I'm doing these. Now the defense position to me is a little bit of a crapshoot. Okay, it's relatively easy to pick the 3 or 4 defenses that are going to score 6 or 7 points. It's the times that they get a pick six or a kickoff return for a touchdown that really moves you up the leaderboard, and those are nearly impossible to predict. So it's a little bit of a crapshoot. So I basically, as I go through my lineups, I'll pick out maybe 4 or 5 different defenses, and I'll just evenly spread them out and kind of hope one binks and it's in the right lineup. So there's really not much to say here, but I do get to go with my highest projected defense of the week. So it's actually not even on the first page of the list here. It's the Cleveland Browns. So it was nice that my highest projected defense wasn't even near the top of the list in salary. So about halfway down, you'll find the Cleveland Browns, and this is again just a great matchup. They're playing the Tampa Bay Bucks, who have allowed 10 sacks combined in the last 2 games and have thrown at least 1 interception in every game. So I think that they're a value option with a decently high floor. They haven't scored anything less than 7 points in the last 4 weeks. So if they come up with 7 or 8, fine, great. But with how many sacks and how many turnovers and how much pressure Tampa Bay allows, you could see some fumbles. You could see an interception return for a touchdown. So that's what we're hoping for. But if they score 8, 9, or 10 points, that'd be awesome too. And last thing about that is, just when you thought Tampa Bay, had to be getting better, basically they come off a bye, they get to play at home, and they put up a goose egg against Minnesota last week. Just little confidence that now they go to Cleveland and can do anything. So just no confidence in their offense at all. So hoping that Cleveland can put up a big day. All right, let's get a wide receiver on the board. And what I'll do is I'll start with a guy who's one of my value plays here. So where is he? I'll just type his name in. So it's Julian Edelman, and I own Edelman in a few season-long leagues. Excuse me, and he hasn't been great. And this is, not one that I feel great about. He's probably the biggest flyer on the team, so to speak, but a guy who is capable of being a PPR monster. He's capable of even, in his prime, his down days are like 6 catches for 60 yards. So, I mean, he's just capable of putting up a lot of points in this format, and his price tag has just plummeted, and this matchup is prime. I mean, we know the Denver defense is good, but this is going to be an absolute shootout. It's got the highest line of any game this week. It's 54.5, and just the sheer volume of plays that I think are going to be run in this game, since both of these teams run a ton of plays on offense. I think that Julian Edelman could just get enough to get his. I don't think in this lineup that I'm putting together, I need him to be a 25 or 30 point guy. I think he has that upside if he catches 9 balls for 100 yards and a touchdown. I mean, that's Julian Edelman numbers. But even if he puts up 6 catches for 60 yards, something like that, I think it would be respectable and be what I need for this price tag. I mean, he really doesn't need to score a ton of points to justify himself. So he's probably my biggest flyer in this lineup, and the guy that I don't feel great about. But in this situation, in this matchup, I think it's a really good spot to utilize him. Okay, let's go back to the running back position here, and who I'm looking for is going to be, let's see here, Giovanni Bernard. So as of the taping of this, which is Thursday, 11 a.m., there actually are a few question marks about Bernard, but I'll tell you why I like him so much. Basically, everyone's a good play against Jacksonville. Okay, Gio has, he's capable of catching a handful of balls, which is always nice in PPR. But he's not just that guy who can break an 80-yard run, which is great. He can snap off an 80-yard run and take it to the house at any point. But he's also scored 4 times from inside the 5-yard line. So he is that back that they'll use close to the goal line. He's capable of, not being vultured by Jeremy Hill. He can finish it himself. So he's a guy that I like this week. I think it's a big bounce back week for him, but there are question marks about his health. So when we finish up here, I'll go back and we'll do a couple pivot options. But if he was healthy and I knew he was going to play and see the number of snaps that he usually sees, which is going to be 20 touches, I would love him in this spot. So hang tight on Gio Bernard. Wait to see what the injury report says, but for right now, we're going to plug him in. We'll go back to the wide receiver position, and we're going to go to another semi-value play here, and it's going to be Andrew Hawkins. So if you can see, so he's $4,900, and you can see how quickly things get bad here. I mean, there's not a lot of great options besides the top tier guys like Des Bryant, who's actually my top projected wide receiver of the week. There's, it gets ugly really quick. Brandon LaFell, 6,000. Larry Fitzgerald, who's not having a good year, 5,700. Keenan Allen, who's boomer bust. Martavis Bryant, who, nobody even knew his name 2 weeks ago, is 5,500. It's just a really tough sell in this area here. Dante Moncrief, same thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to go with someone who's a little more proven, and it's Andrew Hawkins. And Andrew Hawkins I like a lot in this cash game or 50-50 format because of his high floor. He's gone over 13 points in all but 2 games this season. He's basically a PPR monster, just catches a lot of balls on this team very quietly, and he gets to play at home against Tampa Bay. And Tampa Bay has allowed 12 touchdowns to opposing wide receivers in just the last 7 games. So, I mean, they're just really, really bad in the secondary and covering any of these guys. So I expect Andrew Hawkins to have another big day. And I think it's been a little fluky that he hasn't had a better year, because he's actually scored over 13 points in all but 2 games this year, like I said, but he only has 1 touchdown. So, it just doesn't. I mean, touchdowns are fluky, so it just doesn't really add up here that he could be having as good a year as he is without finding the end zone. So in the second half here, if he starts getting into the end zone a little bit more, he's really going to have a huge second half because the catches are there, the yards are there. If he gets in the end zone, you're really going to like it. So Andrew Hawkins is one of the safer plays for me. Let's go to, we'll round out the wide receiver before we plug in the flex. And this is a guy who I think kind of flies underneath the radar a little bit. I love DeAndre Hopkins. I think DeAndre Hopkins is breaking out. I think he is kind of having like Alshon Jeffrey did last year, where he's a young guy with a ton of skill and he's kind of having a breakout season. So I really like DeAndre Hopkins, but the guy on this team is still Andre Johnson. And he's only scored 1 touchdown this year, but I don't know how that's possible. So same thing with Hawkins. I think that a little bit of correction and he could have a huge second half. But again, a high floor. Over 12 points in all but 2 games this year, only with that 1 touchdown. And what I really love about this is, well, 2 things. I love the matchup. Philadelphia does not defend well in the secondary. They're capable of giving up big plays like you saw last week against Arizona, where they gave up an 80-yard touchdown and a 75-yard touchdown. So they're absolutely capable of doing that. But Andre Johnson actually in the red zone is seeing 41% of his team's targets. That is the highest in the NFL for wide receivers. So when they get in close, it's the Andre Johnson show, which again, I don't know how he's only scored 1 touchdown. I think he's been a little bit unlucky, but I think he's just a high floor guy in a great matchup, and if he catches you a touchdown, you might not need it, but it would be awesome. So Andre Johnson is a guy that I've plugged into this lineup. So here we go. So 1 spot left, and if you look back here, again, it's all guys with high floors, and it's a lineup that I really like. Rivers, Lynch, Bernard, who we'll get to in a second. Hawkins has been great, and Andre Johnson has been great. Julius Thomas, you know what he is, and obviously Julian Edelman is my 1. I'm not feeling very comfortable about, but I think it's worth the risk, and again, high upside. So who are we going to flex? I'm a believer, and I buy into that I want a pass-catching running back in my flex in these cash games. If it was a GPP, like I said, I've flexed tight ends. I tend to flex wide receivers a little more because they tend to have a higher upside. But for guaranteed points, I really want a pass-catching running back in my flex position. So for this week, we are going to go with, we got $6,000 left. And we're going to go with Andre Ellington. So he's listed as questionable, but I'm sure he's going to play. He's been basically questionable in every game coming up to this season. And he's just, again, a guy capable of catching 4 to 6 balls a game. That's, 4 to 6 guaranteed points for you. He's coming off a game against the Eagles where he ran it 23 times and no other running back got a single carry. So he's just a workhorse, and he's a guy that is going to get all the touches. It's not a bad matchup. I mean, the Dallas defense is not any better than it was last year, and in fact, it's exactly the same as the bad defense it was last year. But they're just not on the field as much because they're controlling the ball so often. So, he gets to play on the turf, and Arizona's been really good this year. And this is just, even if they get down a lot, even if the Cardinals get down a lot and have to throw the ball, Palmer can dump it off to Ellington. So there's just a lot of opportunity for points here for Andre Ellington. So here it is. This is the lineup, and it's one I feel pretty comfortable about, and I'll roll it out in a bunch of different places this week. But let's talk Gio Bernard. So the latest, you got to keep an eye on him and check the wire. But the latest is not sure if he's going to play yet. So let's assume that he doesn't play, and we have to pivot out of Gio Bernard. What you can do is pretty simple here. So what we'll do is we'll just move Ellington up into his spot, which is super easy to do here. So now we still have Andre Ellington in the lineup, who we like, and we now have 6,700 to spend in the flex. Now, I mentioned that I like to have a pass-catching running back here. So for 6,700, you have Gio Bernard, you have Ahmad Bradshaw, who I like, but not too much. I think I'd have to reconstruct the whole lineup to get him in there. I'd have to improve a couple spots. It's not an easy pivot to make. So what I'm actually going to do is I like Le'Veon Bell a lot. He's a guy that is just a ton of yards from scrimmage. He's going to catch a lot of balls. It's not a great matchup against Baltimore, but I think Le'Veon Bell tends to be matchup proof. So I like him a lot. So what I'm actually going to do is we're going to have to shed $3,000 in salary, but I'm going to plug him in here. So we got to find $3,000 to get away from. And I think the easiest place to probably do this is I don't really want to touch the wide receivers. I think that they, for me, they're locked in. They're solid. But there's a little bit of room to work here at the tight end position. So I love Julius Thomas, but there's a second option in Antonio Gates for $5,300. He's $300 less. So this actually fits perfectly. And if you have been following Antonio Gates, he's on pace to break the NFL record in touchdowns. He sees I'm sorry, for tight ends, and he sees a ton of targets, and he's Philip Rivers' favorite target. So I mean, this actually turns into a little bit of a GPP lineup where you're stacking a pass catcher with your quarterback, but it's probably a little more risk than I'd like to take in a cash game, because these guys are probably going to either both succeed or both fail. But I think it's okay here because of how guaranteed the workload is for Antonio Gates. So I'm comfortable with putting him in there if you have to pivot off of Gio Bernard. So that was a pretty easy one. Keep an eye out on the wire for the injury reports as far as Giovanni Bernard go. Andre Ellington, I'm sure he's going to play, so I can't imagine you're going to have any concerns there. But if you have to get off of Gio, there's an easy way to do it to get Gates and Bell in there. So this is, again, I mean, I like this lineup too. So there's a lot of different ways you can play it, and I wish you guys the best of luck.